her, it was this place where she could be like wild and free, and I think her father allowed her to kind of like run the show there.
Right.
So I think that I think some of her most joyful.
Graceland has a room that wasn't supposed to exist. Not officially. Not in any tour guide's memorized script. Not in any documentary you've ever watched about the king of rock and roll. For 47 years, this space sat behind a door that staff walked past without acknowledging, that family members pretended they couldn't see, and that visitors were never, under any circumstances, allowed to ask about. And now, Riley Keough has blown it wide open. Let's be clear about something before we go any further. Graceland has always had private areas. The upstairs where Elvis died has remained sealed since 1977, and that's public knowledge. But this room is different. This room was never about respecting Elvis's memory or preserving the sanctity of his final moments. This room was about burying something so deep that even the people who worked inside that mansion for decades didn't fully understand what they were protecting. Former staff members have spoken about it in hushed tones over the years, always off the record, always with a nervousness that seemed disproportionate to the subject. They described a space on the ground floor, tucked away from the main exhibition areas, that had been converted into something resembling a personal archive during Elvis's final years. But here's where it gets strange. After Elvis passed, that room wasn't just closed off. It was actively concealed. Furniture was moved to obscure the entrance. Renovations were done to make the door blend seamlessly into the surrounding walls. Someone went to extraordinary lengths to make sure that anyone walking through Graceland would never even think to wonder what was behind that wall. And for nearly half a century, it worked. The Presley estate maintained absolute control over the narrative. Graceland became one of the most visited private homes in America, second only to the White House, and millions of people walked through those halls without ever sensing that they were being guided around a secret. The tours were carefully choreographed, the stories were meticulously curated, and the forbidden room remained invisible to everyone except the handful of people who knew it was there. Then Lisa Marie Presley died, and everything changed. When Riley Keough inherited Graceland, she didn't just inherit a mansion and a legacy. She inherited the keys to every lock, access to every sealed space, and the authority to ask questions that had been shut down for generations. And according to sources close to the estate, one of the first things Riley did was conduct a full, private walkthrough of the property, not as a granddaughter grieving her mother, but as the new owner taking inventory of exactly what she now controlled. That's when she found it. Or rather, that's when she was finally allowed to see what had been hidden from her family's public line for her entire life. The details of what's inside that room are still emerging, and Riley has been strategically selective about what she's confirmed publicly. But what we do know is enough to understand why this discovery has sent shockwaves through everyone connected to the Presley legacy. This wasn't a storage closet filled with old costumes and forgotten memorabilia. This was Elvis's personal vault, a space he allegedly used in his final months to store things he didn't trust anyone else to protect. Documents, recordings, letters, items that paint a very different picture of the king's final chapter than the one we've been sold for decades. And here's what makes this truly explosive. The room wasn't hidden to protect Elvis's reputation. If anything, what's inside could humanize him, could show sides of him the public never got to see. No, this room was sealed to protect someone else entirely. Someone who had every reason to make sure these materials never saw the light of day. Someone who, until very recently, still had enough power within the Presley estate to keep that door closed forever. But they didn't count on Riley. They didn't count on Lisa Marie making sure her daughter would have unrestricted access. And they certainly didn't count on what Riley would choose to do once she understood what had been kept from her. When you understand what was kept in that room, you'll realize why Priscilla Presley fought so hard to keep Riley away from Graceland's true inheritance. To understand what Riley found in that room, you have to understand who Elvis became in his final years. Not the icon, not the legend, the man. And the man who lived inside Graceland during those last months was someone the public never truly got to meet. He was isolated, paranoid, deeply wounded by betrayals he never spoke about publicly, and increasingly convinced that the people closest to him were not who they pretended to be. Elvis had always been surrounded by an entourage, the infamous Memphis Mafia, handlers, managers, family members who all claimed to have his best interests at heart. But by 1976, something had shifted inside him. He started pulling away from people he'd trusted for decades. He began having private conversations that he insisted not be recorded by anyone except himself, and he started writing things down, documenting interactions, preserving evidence of conversations and agreements that he felt might be denied later. This wasn't the behavior of a man losing his grip on reality. This was the behavior of a man who had finally realized he was surrounded by people with agendas he couldn't fully see. The Forbidden Room, according to what's now emerging, became Elvis's personal archive of truth. Not truth for the public, not truth for the media, truth for himself. A record of what was really happening behind the gilded walls of Graceland, preserved by the only person who could be trusted to keep it safe, himself. Inside that space, Elvis allegedly kept recordings of conversations, some made with the knowledge of the other participants, others made without. He kept letters, both ones he'd received and copies of ones he'd sent, particularly correspondence that revealed the financial arrangements and personal betrayals that were slowly bleeding him dry. He kept journals, not the kind of polished memoirs a celebrity might prepare for publication, but raw, unfiltered accounts of how he was feeling, who he suspected of manipulating him, and what he planned to do about it. This wasn't about music. This wasn't about his career or his legacy as an entertainer. This was about survival. Elvis knew on some level that he wasn't well. He knew his health was failing and that the people managing his life had more control over his daily existence than he did. And he knew that when he was gone, those same people would control the narrative. They would decide what the world remembered about Elvis Presley. They would shape his legacy to protect themselves, not him. So he built a vault, not of gold or jewels, but of evidence. Proof of who had done what, who had taken what, who had lied about what. And then he sealed it away in a room that only he controlled, trusting that someday, somehow, the right person would find it. What makes this even more heartbreaking is the timing. Elvis died in August of 1977. Based on what Riley has allegedly discovered, some of the documents in that room were dated just weeks before his death. He was still adding to his archive in his final days, still trying to preserve truth even as his body was failing him. He knew he was running out of time, and he knew that once he was gone, there would be a scramble to control everything he left behind. He was right. Within hours of Elvis's death, Graceland became a battlefield. People who had been circling for years moved quickly to secure their positions, to control access, to make sure certain things never surfaced, and the first target was that room. The archive Elvis had spent his final months building was sealed before anyone outside the innermost circle even knew it existed. But Elvis made one miscalculation. He trusted that his daughter would eventually find her way to the truth, and Lisa Marie did. She just wasn't able to share it publicly before her own death. That burden, that inheritance of secrets, passed to Riley. The room contained evidence of something Elvis never confronted publicly. And the person at the center of it was someone Lisa Marie Presley spent her entire life protecting. But the most disturbing part wasn't what Elvis left behind. It was what someone tried to destroy before Riley could find it. Riley Keough didn't walk into Graceland as a naive granddaughter expecting to find photo albums and sentimental keepsakes. She walked in as a woman who had just buried her mother under circumstances that left the entire family fractured. A woman who had spent months fighting legal battles just to secure what was rightfully hers. And a woman who understood that whoever controlled Graceland controlled the Presley legacy itself. She was prepared for resistance. She was prepared for secrets. What she wasn't prepared for was evidence that someone had gotten there before her. When Riley finally gained unrestricted access to the Forbidden Room, she didn't find the pristine archive Elvis had allegedly left behind. She found gaps, empty spaces where items had clearly once been stored, filing systems with missing sections, recording equipment with tapes removed. Someone had entered that room not decades ago in the chaos following Elvis's death, but recently, within the last several years. And they had systematically removed specific materials while leaving others untouched. This wasn't a robbery. Nothing of obvious monetary value was taken. This was a surgical extraction. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were looking for, knew exactly where Elvis had kept it, and knew exactly why it needed to disappear before Riley could see it. The cover-up wasn't a relic of 1977. The cover-up was ongoing. Think about what that means for a moment. For nearly half a century, that room sat sealed, its contents presumably preserved exactly as Elvis left them. But at some point, someone with access to Graceland, someone with keys and authority and knowledge that most people didn't have, made the decision to enter that space and alter the record. They removed documents that connected to specific people. They erased recordings that captured specific conversations. They eliminated evidence that would have completed the picture Elvis had spent his final months building, and the timing is impossible to ignore. These removals allegedly happened during a period when the Presley estate was in transition, when Lisa Marie's health was declining, and when questions about who would ultimately control Graceland were becoming increasingly contentious. Someone saw the writing on the wall. Someone understood that Riley would eventually inherit everything. And someone made sure that when she opened that door, she wouldn't find the full truth. The question Riley has been quietly asking ever since is the same one you're probably asking right now. Who had access? Who knew what was in that room? And who had the most to lose if those materials ever surfaced? The answer to all three questions appears to point in the same direction, and it connects directly to the public battles that have played out in courtrooms and tabloids over the past year. The attempts to challenge Lisa Marie's trust. The efforts to gain financial control over Graceland before Riley could fully assume ownership. The strange urgency from certain family members to insert themselves into decisions about the estate. None of it was really about money. It was about access. It was about making sure that whatever Elvis left behind stayed buried. Riley has been remarkably measured in her public statements about all of this. She hasn't made accusations. She hasn't revealed specifics about what she found or what's missing. But those close to her say she's been working quietly with archivists and investigators to reconstruct what was taken based on what remains. Elvis, meticulous as he was, apparently kept records of his records. Lists of what he'd stored, when he'd stored it, and why. So while the materials themselves may be gone, the evidence that they once existed is still there, which puts Riley in an extraordinary position. She knows what's missing. She knows who had the access and motive to take it. And she's choosing for now to keep that information close. Some people interpret her silence as weakness or uncertainty. Others see it for what it more likely is. Strategy. Riley isn't just inheriting a legacy. She's preparing for a war over who gets to define it. But here's what nobody's talking about. The real reason this room was sealed for 47 years has nothing to do with Elvis's reputation. It has everything to do with someone else's survival. Riley Keough stands today as the sole guardian of everything Elvis Presley left behind. The mansion, the legacy, the mythology, and now the secrets that were supposed to stay buried forever. She didn't ask for this burden. She inherited it through grief, through loss, through watching her mother carry a weight that slowly crushed her from the inside out. And now Riley has to decide what to do with truths that could reshape everything the world thinks it knows about the king of rock and roll and the people who surrounded him. What makes this situation so deeply complicated is the nature of what's allegedly contained in those remaining materials. This isn't gossip. This isn't scandal for scandal's sake. According to sources close to the estate, the documents and recordings that survived the cover-up point to something far more disturbing than affairs or financial mismanagement. They point to decisions that were made about Elvis's care in his final years. Decisions about who had access to him. Decisions about what medications he received, who controlled his schedule, and who systematically isolated him from people who might have intervened. The picture that emerges isn't just of a man who died too young. It's of a man whose decline may have been accelerated by the very people who claimed to love him most. If that sounds like a heavy accusation, consider what Lisa Marie herself said in interviews over the years. She spoke repeatedly about things she could never forgive. She referenced betrayals that went beyond normal family dysfunction. She carried a bitterness towards certain people that never softened, even as decades passed. And she made sure, in her final arrangements, that Riley would have access to everything. Not partial access, not supervised access, complete and unrestricted access to every corner of Graceland and every secret it contained. Lisa Marie knew what was in that room. She may have been the last person alive who fully understood what Elvis had documented and why. And rather than destroy it herself, rather than let the cover-up succeed completely, she passed the burden to her daughter. Some might call that an act of cruelty, saddling Riley with impossible choices. Others might see it as the ultimate act of trust. Lisa Marie believed that Riley would know what to do when the time came. that Riley would have the strength to either reveal the truth or protect it, depending on what served the greater good. And that's the moral complexity Riley now lives with every single day. The truth about Elvis's final years could vindicate him in ways the public has never understood. It could expose people who've spent decades profiting from his memory while concealing their role in his suffering. It could rewrite the entire narrative of how the King of Rock and Roll spent his final chapter on Earth. But it could also devastate innocent people, family members who had nothing to do with those decisions, children and grandchildren who would be forced to carry the shame of what their parents or grandparents did. Riley isn't just weighing truth against secrecy, she's weighing justice against mercy. Those who watch her moves closely have noticed a pattern. She's not hiding from the truth, but she's not rushing toward exposure either. She's consolidating control over the estate. She's surrounding herself with people she trusts completely. She's letting certain legal battles play out without showing her full hand. And she's making strategic public statements that hint at deeper knowledge without revealing specifics. This is not the behavior of someone who doesn't know what to do. This is the behavior of someone who knows exactly what she's holding and is waiting for the right moment to decide how to use it. The Forbidden Room, Riley Keough's impossible choice. The Forbidden Room has been opened. After decades of remaining sealed, its heavy door finally swung wide, and its carefully guarded contents have been seen by eyes that were never supposed to witness them. The secrets Elvis Presley documented and preserved in that hidden space, the recordings, the photographs, the handwritten accounts, the evidence of betrayals and conspiracies have now passed into Riley Keough's possession and consciousness. She knows what her grandfather wanted the world to understand about the people who surrounded him, controlled him, and ultimately may have destroyed him. But Riley Keough may have already decided that some doors, once opened, need to be closed again. Not permanently, perhaps, but strategically, at least for now. This isn't about protecting the guilty parties who manipulated Elvis or profited from his suffering. It's not about perpetuating the decades-long cover-up that has obscured the truth about his final years and the circumstances of his death. Riley's hesitation comes from a different place entirely, a desire to protect the innocent people caught in between, the family members and descendants who don't deserve to pay for sins they didn't commit. The collateral damage from a full public release would be catastrophic and indiscriminate. Relatives who had nothing to do with the events Elvis documented would find themselves dragged into scandal by association. Children and grandchildren would inherit shame and suspicion for actions taken before they were born. The Presley name itself, already burdened with tragedy, would be subjected to renewed scrutiny and sensationalism that could pursue innocent family members for the rest of their lives. Riley understands that truth and justice don't exist in a vacuum. Every revelation carries consequences that ripple outward, affecting people who bear no responsibility for the original wrongs. She's weighing whether exposing her grandfather's truth is worth the price that innocent people would inevitably pay. Or maybe she's just waiting for the right moment when the impact would be maximized and the narrative controlled. Waiting for the right provocation that would justify the nuclear option of full disclosure. Waiting until the people who originally tampered with that room, who tried to bury its contents and silence its testimony, make one more move against her or her family. Because they will move eventually. People who have spent decades protecting dangerous secrets don't simply accept defeat when those secrets fall into enemy hands. They'll attempt to discredit Riley, to preemptively spin the narrative, to threaten legal action, or to make offers designed to keep the Forbidden Room's contents buried forever. They'll calculate that she won't actually release the evidence, that she values family privacy and personal peace too much to trigger the explosion. And when they do make that move, when they reveal through their actions that they've learned nothing and changed nothing, Riley will be ready. She'll have her strategy prepared, her legal protections in place, her media partnerships established, and her resolve hardened by their continued arrogance. The evidence will be released not as an act of revenge, but as an act of justice that her grandfather deserved, and that they themselves provoked through their unwillingness to accept accountability. The question isn't whether the truth will emerge. The question is when and under what circumstances, and whether those who fear it most will be wise enough to remain silent and accept their diminished power, or foolish enough to force Riley's hand and face the consequences Elvis himself documented for exactly this moment.